Poems are often ways in which we try and hold time or pause time. And I think in that way they have this relationship to elegy. They're almost like the impulse to take a photograph. Even if we don't look at the photograph afterwards, we want to take it to capture something. And I think we have this instinct to capture things before time washes them away. Even the look on someone's face is something that you can't replicate again, but you can hold it in a poem. And you can give a small portion of time the sort of attention in a poem that might last you over 2 or 3 pages. And poems also have this other relationship to time in that they are a form that allows for rereading. I think, you can reread a novel, but you shouldn't expect that your reader will read this novel 4 or 5 times in order to understand it. Whereas with a poem, you might expect a reader to read it once and then read it again and revisit it. So it has this relationship to time that is circular and repetitive. And we know that through revisiting that moment through the poem, the moment changes and we become changed, and we are engaged in a sort of constantly evolving relationship with one moment in time. So I think that poetry, it doesn't necessarily manipulate large portions of time like a novel might do, because a novel has this long duration in which you read it. A poem has a momentary relationship with time, in which you can repeat one moment constantly, and also learn and change as the moment is repeated. So I think that's why poetry requires such attention from a reader. And a novel, hopefully, is somewhere a reader can become loosed into time, loosed into a different time, a different dimension of time through fiction. When I wrote a memoir, it involves a sort of research into this archive which is yourself. And you have to study your own memory. It's quite a strange thing to do. But you sit there at a desk or you walk around and suddenly you remember one thing that someone said to you when you were 15 years old, and it sets off a train of memory. And memory, I think, is not ever present in our minds. It has keys and doors, and we find the key to one memory and it unlocks another memory and it unlocks another. And without that time and attention given to researching this archive of your own memory, you lose those keys and you forget that other memory is there sitting in the background. And you open one door and behind it is another door and behind it is another door. And when I was writing my memoir, I became interested in the idea of accumulated selves or changed selves. This idea that perhaps at the end of all of those doors that you open is this original self that was entirely unformed by the world around you, a kind of pure self. And I had that self in my sights when I was writing. I was trying to open as many doors as possible to get down to this original. To me, places that are important to us and that are formative to us. And I'm very interested in how place interacts with our memories and the way that we understand ourselves. When I return home to the village in which I grew up, my mind relaxes outwards because my memory is no longer stored exactly in my head. It's when I walk past a street corner, I remember going with my friend to the shop that used to be there, or I remember walking with my grandmother in this park, and suddenly my mind is outside itself, and memory is held in buildings or in trees or in a road sign, and I am spread through the landscape, through the place. And that's, I think, what I mean by feeling at home in a place. It's not that you have to feel good about being there, but it's just that you're not entirely distinct from the landscape around you. And I find that now I live in Dublin, and I've lived there for about 8 years, but I don't necessarily have this accruing sense of story in the place where I live. I don't tend to walk down the street and it sparks a memory, which sparks a memory that makes me remember that I belong here and I have this deep history here. And so the mind is held within my head in Dublin, whereas when I go back to where I grew up, my mind is dispersed in a place. And I think that places are very important to the way that we come to understand ourselves. And it's not that you can never escape that place. It's just that certain aspects of yourself are rooted in a building or in a tree. And when you come back to them, suddenly they unlock. And so memory has this kind of physical location for you as well. Quite a cliche in some ways for, you know, a writer that grew up Catholic to say that Catholicism has invented the way that they think and see the world. But I can see a lot of connections between the way I think and write and understand nature and erotics and sensuality as Catholic things. You know, Catholicism gives you the gift of shame. But it also has this other thing that it does, which is to give great dignity to the idea of sin. And I think that's actually very useful, because we all feel guilt, and, you know, whether you call it sin or fault or a mistake, we all feel these things quite deeply. And it's nice to have an arena in which that idea is elevated and given a sort of dignity and grandeur. And so when I was writing the memoir, you know, often memoirs come down to guilt and shame and secrets and things like this. The world of Catholicism and the poetry of Catholicism allowed me to give scope to sin. I didn't need to see it as a sordid thing. I could see it as a redeemable thing. And those ideas that Christianity gives to you of redemption or grace or sin can be useful ways of understanding of life, and also destructive ways of understanding of life. But I think, you know, one thing about Christianity, and I'm no longer a Christian. I no longer believe in God or anything like this. But I'm interested in interesting ways of seeing the world. And I think that religion is as compelling a way of seeing the world as any other I've come across. So I'm interested in it. But to come down to something as simple as the Eucharist, it is a piece of wafer, and yet we're asked to believe that it contains this magnitude of spirituality. It becomes a symbol. It becomes much more than just the physical matter of bread. And I think that that has changed the way that I think about the natural world and about the body and about the relationship that we have with our own bodies and other people's bodies, is that they contain possibility much beyond themselves. A tree or a plant or a fungus or a human body has, to me, its own uniqueness that is irreplaceable and unrepeatable. And in that way, you know, whether we say that is divinity or something spiritual, or whether we say it's biology, I don't care in a way, because it's the sacredness of that unrepeatability, the uniqueness that is really interesting to me. When I wrote All Down Darkness Wide, I became very interested in the poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins, and he has this idea, which is a both a poetic idea and a theological idea. And he has this word inscape that he invents. And inscape is the word he makes up for the certain pattern of uniqueness that makes everything only itself and not something else. So this tree is this tree because its inscape is like this. It is completely unique, even if it follows a sort of pattern of all other oak trees. And I became very interested in that because of its applications to something as simple as being oneself is a much more difficult thing than we might imagine it to be, because everything has this unrepeatable uniqueness. And I think getting that down into a poem or into a memoir requires a sort of attentiveness that it gives a certain quality to prose or a poem, which is what I'm aiming for. The idea of capturing a sort of unique unrepeatableness in a line or in a word or in an image.